Hello, and thank you for joining. Hello, and thank you for joining our monthly virtual discussion. I am Ms. Cummings, and I serve as the PMO advisor, executive assistant to our founder and CEO, Ms. Juana Lawson, here at Tacit Growth Strategies, seen in O, the Oprah Magazine, Entrepreneur, Forbes, San Antonio Business Journal, and more. Tacit Growth Strategies is an awarded contractor of the Purchasing Cooperative of America, a national purchasing cooperative for public sector entities in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. We pride ourselves on being a one-stop shop for all things grants, impact investment, and project management. At Tacit Growth Strategies, we give our clients peace of mind as we help them stay focused on doing what they do best. And now I'd like to introduce you to our founder and CEO, Ms. Juana Lawson.
Hello and greetings. I'm so happy to be here for our monthly virtual discussion. I can't remember which number this is, but we've been very consistent and been very diligent about making sure that we offer these monthly virtual sort of fireside chats to everyone, to the general public, because it's so important to talk more about project management and everything that goes into project management, right? We are a project management office, and not many people are familiar with what it means to be a project management office, especially one that exists outside of a major corporation, right? We are the corporation. We are the, greatest advocate for our clients. And so, as a PMO that's leading in the space that we're leading in a very unique place and time, I think it's so important. We think it's so important to be able to talk and, talk with the public as often as possible. So thank you, Ms. Cummings, for keeping this going for us. This is so very important, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
And our discussion will be around change management. So we have a question. Does change management involve all organizational layers?
This is a great question. People tend to forget that as it relates to managing change, right, there's going to be several different layers that you've got to consider. You've got to consider the project level, you've got to consider the program level, and you've got to consider the portfolio level. And so as it relates to managing change, a lot of times, similar to the success rate of projects, right, a lot of times change does not stick. And the reason why the change doesn't stick is because the project didn't get the proper executive sponsorship that it needed, didn't get the proper embeddedness that it needed within the organizational context to ensure that whatever unique product, service, or result it was that your particular project was endeavoring to create, that it actually was something that could be handed off, right, into the larger general organizational context. If it is of no use to your internal customer or your external customer in many cases, then it's basically a failure, right? It's basically fundamentally, technically going to be considered a failure. So you see that from a standpoint of change management, what's so important as project leaders for us to consider is where exactly the support for your project exists within the larger organizational context. You've got to think about who are your greatest champions that want to see your project be successful, that want to ultimately be the recipients of that unique product, service, or result that you all are endeavoring to create on your project team. Who are those stakeholders? Once you've identified who those stakeholders are that are internal to your organization as well as external to the organization, those are going to be the ones that you, like we like to say, those are going to be the ones that you want to love on a little bit more, because those are going to be the ones who are going to incorporate whatever it is that you are endeavoring to produce through your project. So from a project level, as it relates to managing change, you've got to be very much aware. It's much more difficult, I would say, on the project level, because as a project leader there, residing there, you've got so many levels of stakeholders. Normally within a highly mature organization, you've got so many levels of stakeholders that you've got to ensure really are championing your project, but also understand the usefulness and the utility and the true value of your project. And a lot of times it's going to be missed, right? That's going to be something that a lot of folks within your organization are just not going to understand, and they're not going to care to understand. So there's a lot of education as a project leader that you have to be committed to. And for us, especially in the project management context, that's going to put you into an agile mindset. You're going to have to adopt several agile project management techniques and tools and best practices, because failure will be imminent on that particular project that you're leading if there are not organizational processes, procedures, ways of assessing employee performance. If those things are not already working in your favor as a project leader, you're going to have to do a lot to help to adopt those changes in the organizational context, because really and truly, we already know that organizational culture, Peter Drucker said it best, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? When we say that, what we're being very critical of and being very realistic about is that in reality, most people think that it boils down to culture and structure. And a lot of people put a lot more value as it relates to change management. A lot of people place more value on structure because there's predictability in structure, there's standardization in structure. But really, in reality, for those of us who've been leaders of projects, we know that culture is, if you're not considering culture, then structure is superficial. It's superficial. You've got, different technologies and softwares and SaaS and all these things are in place. But if no one's utilizing it, if no one's using it, then it's all superficial. It's not based on anything. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help you create more successful projects, which is in turn not going to help you create more value for yourselves or for your customers. So it's very structure in that sense, when it's not embedded, can be very superficial. It's things that you say you have, but you're not, necessarily utilizing it properly. Now, when you think about culture, culture is what drives the meaningfulness of the change. Very simply, projects are change. They are vehicles of change. In order for you to have a successful project as a project leader, especially for your team members, you all have to speak the language of change. And speaking the language of change is not only thinking about crisis management, it's not only thinking about managing, identifying and managing those risks, it's also about sharing in the vision, sharing in creativity, sharing in the work. And I think when we talk about change management, we often forget about that. We forget about the whole point for discussing, change management. Change management is a topic of discussion because of the dynamism that is involved with managing and leading projects, no matter where you're working, right? You're working for a startup, a lean startup. Guess what? Every day is an experiment. Every day something is different. There's an opportunity for you to test and implement and fail every single day when you're in a lean startup environment. If you're working for a Fortune 5 or Fortune 100 company, that's a little different, right? There's a lot more standardization. There's a lot more, hardcore, rigorous policies and procedures that are in place, and you're not changing that, right? There's a bureaucracy in place, and that's what it's going to be. So when you're managing change in that context, it obviously gets to be a lot more complex. But again, the point is for you to be thinking about essentially three things. You've got to be thinking about the culture, organizational culture, and how you as a project leader or program leader or portfolio leader can help to drive the meaningfulness of the need for that change. But you also need to be thinking too about the superficiality sometimes of structures. And how can you move a structure from superficial to something that is substantial, something that brings you stability, but it also brings you innovation through that stabilization, right? And then the other thing that you need to be considering is what type of culture do you have in terms of exploration and execution? Where you all, when you think about the risk tolerance of the organization that you're, working within the organizational context, what is the risk tolerance on your project level versus on your program level versus on your portfolio or enterprise level, right? Sometimes those things are conflicting. Sometimes you'll find, and you see this a lot with a lot of our clients in the IT department, it's a constant experiment. Every day is an experiment. They're just tossing, pasta noodles on the wall. You walk in, there's just craziness. Okay. It works for them because they have the types of procurement that allow for them to constantly be testing things for the customer, right? So the customer is more invested in exploration than they are execution because they're using an agile technique. They're looking at it from the standpoint of creating micro deliverables. Essentially, these are micro deliverables that they're creating, and those micro deliverables allow for them and the client, whether the client be internal or external to the organization, to constantly be testing and providing feedback on the utility, really, and the usefulness and the value, most importantly, of that micro deliverable, right? So from a change management standpoint, you find in those types of environments, those types of project environments, that change management is a whole lot more value driven because the organization in that context is supportive of that particular department taking the lead on how they go about not only executing on the work, but also how they go about receiving feedback and communicating with different vendors and sharing, again, through procurement, supply chain management, sharing with those vendors opportunities not only for collaboration, meaningful collaboration, but opportunities for everyone involved to leverage that expertise and bring in more fruit for everyone to benefit, right? So these are some of the things that we need to be more mindful of as it relates to managing change in the project environment.
And I think you kind of touched on this question someone has. Why is it so important to prepare for unforeseen events? And I think you kind of, spoke on it a little bit.
For sure, right? Because the change is inevitable, as we all know. And what it is that what I appreciate, Project Management Institute published a practice guide, I want to say a few years ago, and it was directed to change managers, right? Obviously, it's all within project management, within our lexicon, but it was specifically targeting project managers who are leading projects in a very dynamic environment, where in which change is on a daily, almost weekly basis, right? Very much more frequent than a lot of other people's work environments, right? And so with that practice guide, there are a lot of things there that a lot of the folks that are listening right now may find useful. Change management in of itself is its own lexicon. So there's a lot of opportunity between project management as a lexicon, of course, as a discipline, Agile as a discipline on its own, and change management as a discipline on its own. There's a lot of intersection in terms of how you can go about implementing different tools and techniques and lessons learned from projects that didn't go as planned in using some of these tools and techniques. There's a lot of ways for folks who are really serious about getting into change management to be a little bit more educated and equipped when they go into environments like a lean startup, for example, like we were talking about before, where in which you can expect change on a pretty much a daily basis, right? Managing you being sophisticated and well-resourced as it relates to managing change in those environments is very, very critical and very important. So I would invest, if that's the type of environment that anyone that's watching this is in, I would highly recommend you go ahead and check out that practice guide that the Project Management Institute published a few years ago. I think it's entitled Managing Change in the Organization. So check that out. That's a fantastic practice guide. It's sort of similar to the Agile practice guide, where you'll get a lot more hands-on knowledge than you will, your traditional university textbook, where they have some case studies, but most of it's just, trying to give you the fundamental knowledge. With the practice guides, it's more hands-on and it's more tools and techniques that you can start to deploy today. So check that out. If there's other resources that you all, anyone that's watching this would like to get in front of, just send us a message. Our contact information is going to be at that QR code that you see on Ms. Cummings' video. But then also, if you're on our YouTube channel, you can see our contact information on the About tab there. So just get in touch with us. We're more than happy to, share more resources with you as it relates to change management, should you need it.
Okay, and Ms. Lawson, is there any final words you have for our viewers today?
I would just say, let us know, keep bringing in the questions, and let us know, if there's any other topics that you want to learn a little bit more about from the standpoint of practitioners, folks who, like us, are project management office leaders, CEOs. Of course, my moniker is the PMO CEO. If there's, and Ms. Cummings' moniker is the PMO advisor. So if there's more information that you'd like to gather, please always feel free. The door's always open. Feel free to get in touch with us. Our contact information is not only on our website at growthistacit.com, but as I was mentioning before, it's also on our YouTube channel. So we're very easy to get a hold of, and we're always happy to meet and talk with new people, no matter where you are in the world. So feel free to reach out. And I would say final word would be keep it going, keep pressing, and keep making the impossible possible. And we'll see you all next month.
All right. Thank you.